The classic children's author Enid Blyton, probably best known for the exciting adventures of her famous five. But this month, new versions of the books hit the shelves with the so-called old-fashioned words taken out.
Yes,
so,
gone are the luncheons, they're now lunches, and the lanterns are now torches. The idea is aimed at bringing Blyton to a new generation. Here to discuss that, The Guardian journalist and author Lucy Magnan, and publishing director behind the changes, Anne McNeil. Good morning,
Hello.
Shima. Golly,
Good morning.
This is all very peculiar, as they might have said in the old version. So why?
Well, there are very clear reasons why. Famous Five has been read by generations of children now. They're beloved texts. They're what we would call beloved texts. But some independent research showed that there were certain words in the dialogue that were forming barriers, really, for contemporary children who were unable to get into the characterisation, and because of that, they weren't able to access the books, and they wanted to. So it seemed absolutely the obvious thing to do.
Lucy, language is an evolving thing, and we must allow the famous five books to be changed. Do you agree?
No, I don't. I think it's a very strange thing to, as you say, change a beloved text. I think you have to have very good reasons before you change a book, and I'm not sure that a perceived barrier between modern child and a book is a good enough reason to do it. I think what those words actually are something that give a child a minute's pause and make them figure something out and then carry on reading. I don't think they form that much of a barrier to justify actually changing.
And Enid Blyton today, Charles Dickens tomorrow, and who knows when for Shakespeare.
Well, the truth is that Enid Blyton used great vocabulary, and we've kept her vocabulary in the narrative. It is purely the fact that in order to get into the plot, one needs to follow the character, and some of the words were absolutely putting children off. We haven't updated them, they're not modernised. They are slightly revised in order to keep those books being read by children and not just read to children, and that's the important thing. We want children to read them for themselves and not just have them read to them.
I think you've done more than revise. You've taken out things like you've no longer said you can't use the word we're all square. It's now we're all even. And actually, squared and squared away is actually still in common usage in the wider world. But children aren't getting that initial exposure to a slightly different way of putting things.
Is it about, for you, protecting certain words or keeping certain words still in common parlance? Or is it that you want children to still appreciate that there was a time when people spoke differently, when children spoke differently?
I think to modernise books from a different period is actually depriving children of something quite important, which is that there was a time when the honour of the school meant something and school tunics were uniforms. And what's the point of reading if you're never going to expose children to something slightly different?
And let me pick up 1 or 2 words that you've changed. For instance, you've said you've changed tiresome to annoying. You've changed fellow to man, mother and father to mum and dad, sweater to jumper. These are all words which are in very common parlance still.
Yes, and these words are still used within the context of the telling of the story. We haven't changed the stories at all. We haven't changed the time of the setting. We haven't changed any of the plots.
Changed the cover.
At all.
Changed the cover.
What we've done, literally, is tried to make sure that the way the children are chatting in the books is something that is easily understood by a contemporary reader. And I think Enid Blyton would have agreed. She wrote her books in order that children would read them themselves, and she really did believe in lively dialogue. She said that on many occasions, and that is in print saying that. She wanted her dialogue to be lively and accessible.
Let's have a look at a couple of front covers. The older version and the newer version. In fact, you can see them in the back of the screen. So just behind you, you've got the older one. That would be from the 40s, I imagine. Can you just have a look? Yeah. 5 on a Treasure Island. And then we've got the modern version. Which is that? There it is. Do you think the older version put children off buying it, or would put children off even reading it?
I don't, actually. Sales of the Famous Five have been fantastic over nearly 70 years. We regularly sell about 500,000 copies a year, which is amazing.
So you didn't need to change the cover?
Well, the old covers are still available.
But you didn't need to change the literature either,
We have both editions available. We have the choices available for the reader to buy whichever edition they want.
There you go. You can buy whichever one you want, Lucy. You have a choice.
I'm not sure how many harried parents are going to appreciate that there is, you know, the original, the first folio edition of Enid Blyton and the modern version. I suspect the modern will supplant the original for, you know, random purchasing purposes, which I think is a shame because...
And isn't there a danger? Isn't there a danger? If you start with Enid Blyton, you will end up with Dickens, changing Dickens and making Dickens more approachable, accessible.
All I would say is that there's many abridgments and retellings of Dickens, Shakespeare, Austen. Look at the number of teenagers who are now accessing Pride and Prejudice through film, and Emma through Clueless. It's a very exciting time for reading, literature, and for you know, we should make these books available.
All right. Thank you both very much. Very
Thank you.
Stimulating debate. Thank you.
Which was over in a trice.
It was indeed. You bet, as they used to say.